So I thought I'd just have a bit of a ramble today, just a ramble, you know, and you may want to listen to this or you may not, I don't know, but I was just going to get a couple of political things out of the way first, and then I might talk a little bit about myself, but a couple of things. The first one was, I'm just going to say some brief things about this, about Bernie Sanders sort of finally hitting back at Joe Biden. You know, I'm not sure. Oh, that's Aoife. He has a little bird be safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. Joe Biden, of course, if you follow his past, he's often talking about how he's going to cut Medicare and cut Social Security and things like that. And there's many, many videos of that.
We can't launch dishonest attacks against fellow Democrats. We have to beat Donald Trump. Now Bernie's campaign has unleashed a barrage of negative attacks on Joe Biden. They've even accused Joe Biden of supporting Paul Ryan's cuts to Social Security. Bernie's campaign is not telling the truth. Joe Biden has repeatedly voted to save Social Security. He and President Obama beat back Republican attempts to privatize it. And in 2012, Joe Biden even said he didn't support those cuts to Paul Ryan.
We will be no part of a voucher program or the privatization of Social Security.
Biden's plan protects Social Security and will increase benefits. Bernie's negative attacks won't change the truth. Joe Biden is still the strongest Democrat to beat Donald Trump.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time.
Well, we've got some bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand benefits. Damn.
Evidence over the years of him doing that, and he denies, of course, because they're just liars. These people that are the Democratic nominees, most of them are just liars, and so he's lying about the fact that he's never said that, but he has many times, and I've even seen a video of him saying that, talking about Paul Ryan and talking about cutting Social Security. So anyway, Bernie Sanders released an ad about that, hitting back at Joe Biden, who was lashing out at Bernie Sanders. I don't really know what the chances of Bernie Sanders is for getting the nomination. Like I've said before, I think the Democratic Party is more would rather Donald Trump win than have anybody remotely progressive win to become president of the United States. They would rather have Donald Trump win than have anybody remotely progressive become the nominee. Anyway, but I thought that was good that, you know, when I heard, I was watching Kyle Kulinski and I heard that he'd actually started pushing back instead of this ridiculous narrative. He keeps saying how Joe Biden is his friend. Why would you have friends? Tell me, why does anybody want to put that out there? They don't like him. The Democratic Party doesn't like him. Joe Biden might be his friend, whatever that means, but I mean, these people, they don't care about people. They don't care that they're dying because they don't have medical cover. You know, Joe Biden doesn't care if people are dying. He meets people at these town hall meetings, but he can't possibly care, because if he did care, he wouldn't be trying to make sure that people don't have Medicare for all. He wouldn't be doing that. And I don't know how people can have friends like that. They're a whole different class of people. They have no moral center, these people, like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton lies through her teeth about Tulsi Gabbard, saying Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset. And Tulsi Gabbard has the sense to take her to court for $50 million. Will she be successful? I don't know. But I mean, these people are just liars. So anyway, the other thing I just wanted to briefly touch on is I heard, this is probably old news, but I heard this forensic examiner sort of saying that Jeffrey Epstein had, you know, sort of, if you've actually hung yourself, really, to kill yourself, which, by the way, would be impossible in that cell that he was in that Manhattan cell. But just say he was able to do that. You would actually have, a lot of your blood would go to your legs. So you'd have cyanose legs. That means sort of blue color in your legs. And you'd also, you wouldn't have blood vessels bursting in your eyes like he had. That's signs that you've been strangled. So Jeffrey Epstein didn't have the bluish coloured bottom of his legs where all the blood would pool if you'd hung yourself. But he did have, sort of the blood vessels, patechony, I think it's called, bursting in your eyes because someone's tried to strangle you. So anyway, but that just goes by the board. And by the way, what is Ghislaine Maxwell still doing, running around free? I mean, the woman was, basically his madam, procuring and grooming young women for him. What is she still doing running around? I mean, it's just, I mean, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be really, really hilarious. But anyway, she's still running around free. It's months later. Another thing that cropped up is Pompeo, instead of actually supposedly putting the brakes, this is what they just tell the media, but Pompeo, instead of putting the brakes on what they've done recently, which is, killing a very important Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, instead of putting the brakes on all of that and trying to sort of like hold back and stuff, no, they've actually put out this thing, firstly, that it looks like they're after the person that's replaced Soleimani, so they're after, the US empire is after that person, but also Pompeo mentioned in a speech recently that they have this it's called some sort of retaliation thing. There's some expansion of that thing of killing important people and they're going to apply that to China and Russia. Now, if you're going to do that kind of thing, that's declaring war on those countries. It's actually illegal to be assassinating people like that, like Soleimani. It's against international law, but they've actually put out that they're going to expand on that, meaning, and expand on that in relation to China and Russia. So they're basically putting out things that they're going to sort of be assassinating other, military figures possibly, or even, who knows, it could be anybody. It could be Lavrov, the foreign minister, the Russian foreign minister. It could be some Chinese official. Just throwing this in here, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think that when 2021 comes around, when Trump probably is going to be elected at the end of this year, 2020. Sorry for the wriggling. Oh, there's Aoife again. He's such a sweet little guy. He's only just turned a year old. We adopted him about 5 months ago when our Anjushri died. She was about 17, and we've been giving her medical treatments, keeping her quality of life was very good, but we were giving her medical treatments for chronic renal failure for about 5 years, and then she finally succumbed to chronic renal failure, so we adopted this little guy. Anyway, so about 2020, the US federal elections. I feel like Donald Trump is going to get back in because the Democratic Party would rather, as I said, have Donald Trump win than a progressive. Anybody who's remotely progressive, so they'll do their best to steal the primary from Bernie Sanders again, and Bernie Sanders will probably let them again, and then he'll probably endorse. He said he's going to endorse whoever the Democratic Party picks as their nominee. But anyway, they're just not an alternative at all. They really are not, and they continue to ignore what the public want. Medicare for all. They continue to ignore all that sort of thing, and just continue on with their neoliberal policies. They don't care about the public, and also they continue on unabated with these very expensive wars. $738 billion with a B dollars they recently gave Trump, even though they continue to call him dangerous, and they continue to call him a Manchurian candidate. But they happily give him $738 billion with a B, to continue on these awful imperialist wars. So how dangerous do they really think he is? They're basically, he's doing their work that they don't have, so they don't have to. They can sort of go, oh, he invaded Iran, we didn't want him to invade Iran. Rubbish. they're quite happy for him to invade Iran. They're all paid off by weapons manufacturers and lobbyists of all kinds. They're a war party, the Democratic Party, just like the GOP. So all this feigning concern and, sort of virtue signaling and the whole bit, it's nonsense. They're okay with that. And so if they can blame Donald Trump if he gets back into office, they can go, sure, we didn't want that to happen, but they're quite happy for him to really do that. They wouldn't have given him the powers that they have. Obama gave him extraordinary powers just before he left office. And, the Democrats it was only like a month or so ago, gave him the powers to invade Iran without seeking authorization. Now, they've actually gave him those powers, right? The Democrats, there was 88 of them, gave him that power. And now they're saying that they don't want him to have it. Well, Bernie Sanders has put up a bill with Ro Khanna saying that he doesn't want him to have the power, but the Democrats gave him that power. So if they really believe he's some sort of Manchurian candidate and that he's owned by Russia and Putin and all that Russiagate nonsense, if they really believe that, why on earth would they give him the largest military bill funding to do what he's going to do? And why would they allow him to not seek authorization from Congress in the National Defense Authorization Bill? Why would they do that? Because they're totally okay with it. That's why. They're totally okay with him doing that. So anyway, what I was going to say about once he gets in, which looks like he probably will, then he's going to, I think he's going to immediately invade Iran in the beginning of 2021. He seems to always do dramatic things in the beginning of the year. A couple of years ago, it was DPRK. It looked like he was going to invade DPRK or bomb them. In the beginning of this year, he was, this Qasem Soleimani and all of that, knowing full well. You probably, I'm sure he knew full well what that was going to do. And he's got Adelson, his the big GOP donor, who gives half the money that they need, I think, in the GOP. He was funding Trump's campaign, Sheldon Adelson, and he has always wanted to have Iran has been in his crosshairs. So I think Donald Trump is pleasing the Israel lobby. He's pleasing Adelson. I don't think he really cares one way or another about a lot of things that he does. He's a warmonger, a big one, but I don't think he has this burning desire to invade Iran. I think he's pleasing his donor, Sheldon Adelson, is probably going to be giving him more money in the future for whatever, and it's a sort of a quid pro quo. I don't know. He gives Donald Trump billions of dollars, or is it billions? I think, I don't know, for his campaign. Many millions anyway, and then Donald Trump pays him back, with invading Iran. So I think that's what's going to happen in early 2021, if not sooner, but I think he'll probably wait so that he can still say to his, base, look, I didn't start any new wars, and then, of course, once he gets reelected, well, he doesn't really have to please his base anymore. He's in for the next 4 years. And that's when it's really going to get scary. That's when it's really going to get scary because he's going to see that as some sort of mandate to start really pushing for these sort of authoritarian sort of things that he's already doing now. Like what's happening to Glenn Greenwald. The US is behind that with Bolsonaro trying to get, sort of imprison Glenn Greenwald, the journalist, on sort of supposedly the same sort of thing that they're accusing Assange of. That's what they're trying to get Glenn Greenwald on, and the US was behind that. I think that that's what's going to possibly happen to other journalists in the USA when Donald Trump gets in, which is very likely. I'm concerned for independent journalists, the ones that I mentioned, concerned for their welfare, because I think that what's stopping? You have to ask the question, what's stopping this government from just doing whatever the hell they want, really? Because they don't take any notice of international law. They don't care about international laws, the US empire. They don't care that they fund genocides like they've been doing in Yemen. They don't care what Saudi Arabia is doing. They don't care about giving Saudi Arabia secrets, nuclear technology. They don't care that Julian Assange is that this is totally ridiculous. An Australian citizen, a publisher, a journalist, they're going to extradite him and throw him in prison for 175 years. That is insane fascism sort of stuff. They have no regard for their own laws in their own country. They have no regard for press freedom. They have no regard for people of color. They have really no regard for anybody except the weapons industry and making profits for Wall Street and corporations and big pharma. That's who they care about. If that's all they care about, and they demonstrate it all the time, but they don't care about international law, so what's stopping them from just doing whatever the hell they want? Who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop the US empire from trying to take over the whole world? Who's going to stop them from invading Iran? I know that it's going to be bloodshed almighty because Iran's going to have so many countries coming to its aid. It's going to be a really bloodshed, blood in the streets, and there's going to be all sorts of carnage in the U.S. Military and on Iran. But I don't think they care. If they can get away with it, they will. And what I think they might do, and I'm sorry, I don't mean this to sound fearmongery or anything, but what I think they might do, and they've been wanting to use their nuclear weapons, those limited range tactical nukes, they've been wanting to use them. And just like they did in World War II when they didn't have to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they did it because they wanted to use those nuclear weapons because Japan was already lining up to surrender, right? But they did it anyway because they wanted to see what those nuclear weapons would do. And I think it's the same with these tactical nuclear weapons. The US wants to try them out, and I think they're going to try them out on Iran. They've been vilifying Iran for decades, so that I think they can get away with it. People will go, well, those evil Iranians, they're all terrorists. So I wouldn't be surprised if they nuke Iran with these limited range, in quotes, nukes in the beginning of next year. It's terrible, but I get this terrible feeling that that's what they're going to do, because I think they're really, I'm sorry to use this word insane, but I really can't think of another word. They're insane with power, And I'm not saying that Trump is some special aberration. He's not. Trump is not an aberration. I mean, he's just empire with the mask off. He's crass, and that's why they want to get rid of him and get a smooth operator like Obama, so that they can keep, Obama was saying all sorts of smooth things and dancing on talk shows with Ellen and all this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, he was expanding 2 wars to 7. And he'd also helped start that genocide in Yemen. He destroyed Libya with the help of Hillary Clinton. We saw he died, that dreadful thing that she said. Just awful things that he was doing while he was being all cool and groovy and, hanging out with Michelle Obama and them looking. And you still see this sickening display on Twitter of people going, the nostalgia for Barack Obama and his wife. I mean, it's sad. People, they're either so propagandized that they think that Obama was great. Ask the Iraqis what they think of Obama. Ask Yemen. Ask Libya, who now has slavery. Gaddafi actually had free healthcare and stuff like that. It wasn't a paradise by any means, Libya, but it had free healthcare. It had all sorts of good things for the people. And the US can't stand that. They want to go in there and destroy the country, stop the competition, and then take over. That's what they do. They do it over and over and over again. So, but people carrying on about the Obamas being wonderful and God, I wish we had them again. Instead, we've got this guy. He was awful too. He just did it with a smile on his face in a good suit with an attractive wife, and he was attractive, and, and they've still got people fooling them. They're still fooling people. Still. Even though he's joked after Obama left office, he was joking with Wall Street people at this event saying, I made you lots of profits, so say thank you. I mean, these are the sort of people, the psychopaths. Some are prettier than others, but they're all psychopaths. Anyway, I probably talked long enough. I'm keeping an eye on Aoife. He's a little guy, and I just like to keep an eye on him and make sure he's not up to mischief. The doomsday clock. Oh, by the way, before I go on to that, about Biden too, you must read the Grey Zone's reporting about Biden and Latin America and how much he was meddling in Latin America. I mean, the guy is I didn't know how bad he was until I read some of these Grey Zone things. But then my introduction to US politics has been very late, because living in Australia, we just get propaganda here all the time. And I still thought in 2012 that there was a good party and a bad party. You know, there was the Democrats, who are the good party, the party of diversity, and the GOP, which is the awful party, you know? I still thought that in 2012, until I came across Breaking the Set with Abby Martin. And then I started to realize, wow, was I completely propagandized too? But it's not surprising, because we don't have any real fourth estate here in Australia. We don't. We have even less, much less than the US does. So we're completely propagandized here. It's just lucky that, you know, that I had the internet and I found Breaking the Set. I'm not even sure how I found that, but I'm so glad I did, even though, of course, it's really hard now to deal with the fact that everything is so far gone, and that when you're actually speaking the truth about things, it does sound like you're a complete conspiracy theorist nut. It sounds like that when you're actually saying the truth about what's really happening. This leads me to something I was going to talk about being isolated here where I am. You know, in a rural location that I am, there's that sort of, that can be isolating, although I love where I am. So that sort of isolation I find good. You know, it's because I love being in amongst just beautiful trees and lots of space and stuff. That's a good kind of isolation, if you can call it that, really. And I love my own company, although I'm not here, you know, I'm not here by myself, but, you know, this is a beautiful area here in Tasmania. But there's the other sort of isolation, like I said, when people think that you're, well, you know, if you attempt to sort of talk about the Russiagate thing, which all they've heard is that Putin is interfering with elections, and basically Putin is some sort of omniscient evil being that's running everything almost. I mean, that's how insane it's gotten, right? That's how the narrative is. It's so crazy. If you bring that up basically here in Australia to most people, 9 out of 10 people, or 9 out of 100 people, 99 out of 100 people will think that if you say something different to that, they think you're some sort of conspiracy nutter, really. That's how propagandized people are here. I'd say it's probably even higher. I'd say maybe even 999 out of 1,000 people would probably think that. It's sort of very, very rare that anybody would think anything different. And that, you can pretty much say that about everything, and they still think the US empire is some sort of, well, they don't think it's an empire firstly, but they still think the US is just a great ally and a force for good in the world. The same sort of propaganda that the US continues to put out about itself, that it's a force for good in the world, and if things go wrong, it was unintentional, you know? It was an unintended consequence. Like what happened, you know, what's happened in Iraq, you know, the killing of 1 million people or whatever. It's an unintended consequence. No, they actually, at this point, are happy destroying countries and killing off competition, and then taking resources, and then they have hegemony in the region. But they put out, you'll basically get the opposite narrative of what they're really doing. You get that every single day on Twitter. Pompeo puts out the opposite narrative to what they're really doing. A lot of people believe that. A lot of people here believe that. Really, they do. So I sort of live in this kind of a situation where people are propagandized to the nth degree, and it's not even worth it challenging that narrative. You can sort of try, but you might find that you don't get invited back to that dinner, or they won't call you anymore. I mean, it's sort of like that. So that can be very isolating. And, you know, there's a lot more people in the US who know what's happening. And probably there should be lots more, but at least there are groups of people who do. But here it's not like that. And I'm not just talking about Tasmania, I'm talking about Australia. So that's very isolating. And so my only sort of community in that regard is online. If it weren't for sort of some online interactions, and they're pretty small because the people are very busy, but if it weren't for online, I probably wouldn't have any sort of interaction about anything, like in that regard, about what's really happening. Or just feeling some sort of support. It doesn't even have to be a back and forth. Just even, for example, joining in on live streams, by the Empire Files or by the Grey Zone or by Robbie Martin on his a very heavy agenda YouTube channel. He has some live streams every day, and I think I've mentioned this before, he plays arcade games from the 80s. He's trying to get people involved from Twitch, I think, people who might be interested in arcade games. He sort of intersperses politics with playing these games. He's trying to get people in on that, which is actually kind of clever, and I enjoy joining in on those live streams because it's kind of, I feel like, well, there's some sort of connection somewhere. I'm not feeling completely isolated in my understanding of what's happening in the world in relation to U.S. imperialism and wars and that kind of thing. And I find that difficult sometimes, feeling isolated in that way. It's sort of, it's hard because you can see things closing in, and yet most people here in Australia don't know what's going on. They don't realize what's happening to people, to black and brown people overseas, with this so-called ally that we have, the US, who, by the way, is meddling all the time in our affairs here in Australia, all the time. I think I mentioned a few times now how the CIA admitted that they helped get rid of Gough Whitlam, a prime minister we had in the mid-70s. He was a democratic socialist. He was for indigenous rights. He was not for the wars. He had free healthcare for Australians, completely free. It's not completely free now. We have like a two-tiered neoliberal system now. You can still go to doctors for free, and you can get drugs pretty much for free, certain types of drugs. But gradually they're making so many cuts to Medicare, they're trying to get rid of it. Make it dysfunctional, make public hospitals dysfunctional and so forth, so that they can privatize things. Trying to make public hospitals completely dysfunctional so they can privatize everything. But anyway, Gough Whitlam was a really good prime minister, really good, and they helped get rid of him. He was dismissed. The other side blocked supply, and that was the end of that. And it's been a neoliberal mess ever since. And the US helped create that for us. So thank you very much. But they're also meddling. There's an Australian Strategic Institute, which is funded by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and it informs the government. They're just a warmongering right-wing think tank, and they're at this moment they're drumming up anti-Chinese propaganda. And they have people from the United States writing for them, helping them with policy stuff. This is who we have informing the government. One of the many nefarious kind of groups. I've done a video on that one, Australian Strategic Policy Institute, I think it's called. They even have like ads for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin on the front of their front page. So this is, the US has just got its finger in so many pies, and so what I'm saying is I can, you can see it all closing in on us here in Australia with the neoconservative government we have. By the way, Scott Morrison believes that we need to adapt rather than do anything about the climate crisis. That's the sort of end of days believing evangelical Christian in quotes we have running the country. Somebody who thinks we need to adapt to imminent human extinction. He hasn't actually said that, but he thinks we need to adapt. This is a sort of crazy, these crazy people who are, they're holding the power like this. I don't know who voted that guy in. It wasn't me. But voting isn't where it's at. It isn't where it's at. A non-violent grassroots movement and non-violent civil disobedience, I think, is all we have left. But anyway, what I'm saying is I feel isolated in that there's so many Australians don't know anything about what's happening. And I think a lot of them are only just starting to wake up with how serious this climate crisis is, because everything is apocalyptic fires everywhere. I mean, we still get smoke on the hills in the distance from the fires on the mainland. In the beginning of 2019, we had fires across the river. We lost 180,000 hectares of forest. It was awful, and I spent a couple of weeks. We couldn't hardly be outside because of the smoke. It was so awful. And we thought we were going to be affected here, but fortunately it never jumped to the river. But this is the sort of things we've got happening here. And so people are only just starting to realize this is really dire, but at this point I think it's really too late. We can do stuff to address it if the government was willing, but they're not. They're still hanging, and so is the Labor Party, they're still hanging on to fossil fuels, and they don't really want to do anything. So nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen here. So we're just going to go up in flames, and I think in 5 years' time, it's going to be much, much worse than it is now. But people are starting to freak out about it here. They really see it's right in their face now. Right in their face. But they don't see what's happening with US imperialism and how we're probably going to be, it could be, who knows, it could be a World War III in the beginning of 2021, like I've just talked about. It's hard, it's hard when you don't have any sort of people living in your own country. You might get the very rare person who has a clue, but, it's just not, it's isolating. And I think I've mentioned how I deal with that. I'll end on this. I had other things I was going to talk about. Maybe I'll talk about them tomorrow. This is just a bit of a ramble. Sorry, I tend to ramble and then it goes into a long, it sort of ends up being like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So sorry about that. But, the way I deal with that and the way I'm dealing with the knowledge about what's most likely imminent human extinction, for one, possible nuclear war of some kind in the beginning of next year, or at least a World War III of some kind. The neoliberal government here that is basically trying to take everything away from the public and give everything to their corporate friends. Did I say neoliberal? I meant neoconservative. And who doesn't believe they're not going to do anything about the climate crisis, and neither is the other side, the other major party. The US, that whole US imperialism thing and the climate crisis, the neoconservative things taking away everything, all of those different factors, can be very anxiety-provoking. I'm sure you would probably agree if you are aware of all this. And I decided a few months ago that I was not going to, I was going to spend more time thinking, trying to be in the moment, so that I don't get too overwhelmed by those factors that are all sort of, it's like a conflagration of all sorts of awful things. That's what it is. And sometimes it can seem complete, because no people in history have ever had to deal with the possible imminent human extinction. And don't forget, I'm not mentioning the billions of other animals that are going to be taken with us through no fault of their own, right? But nobody in the history of the human species has had to face that. And it's looking very much like that as time goes by, particularly with the complete inaction of governments. In fact, they're going the other way. A little beetle going up there. Those are very big things to deal with. And I already have. So I've already suffered with depression in my life, on and off, throughout my life. So that on top of my already existing depression that I deal with in my life, it's heavy duty. But I've actually found that, for me anyway. But I mean, I'm a white person. I don't have the sort of problems, that people in Palestine have, you know, the Palestinians and people in Libya and all over the world, black and brown people all over the world, and how they're dealing with white supremacy. I don't have that sort of problem. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know. It's just, you know. But just talking about myself right now, you know, the way I deal with it now, because there's so many, it's just a clusterfuck of all sorts of awful things happening. And the way I deal with it is to try to do these podcasts, to try and get involved politically in some way, try and disperse independent journalism, you know, volunteer, all sorts of things. I'm thinking about learning Arabic. That has nothing really much to do with this, but I'd like to think that it might help in some ways. I might get involved with asylum seekers in Hobart. There's plenty of those from these wars. There's a bunch of things that I do. I don't get angry about it because that's not really going to help anybody. Of course I'm angry underneath it all, but the way I express my anger is to try and do something. I also try and do a be here now thing where I just, when I'm doing something, I'm there doing it, and I'm trying not to allow all these thoughts about all these various things to go on in my head. And that's sort of really reduced my depression to a great degree, and also, you know, it's still there, but it's reduced it a lot, and it's also reduced my anxiety. So I would invite people to consider doing Be Here Now a lot more often. It's almost like a meditation that you're actually doing while you're walking around and doing things. It's very beneficial. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here because my little guy Aoife is sort of wandering off, and I've got to keep an eye on him. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive notifications when I drop a video. So thanks for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Peace.